Hello, fellow nerds. I'm Scruffy at Scruffy Tales, and you have just found the Nerd Zone. And in this video, I will be rambling, ranting, talking, discussing what Andor should or could have been. Uh, a TV show that had a lot of promise that, to my mind, didn't truly, really deliver. And to be honest, it was well and truly a great idea to make a TV show based on the earlier days of Cassian Andor and his pathway towards the rebellion. Sadly, though, it was very poorly executed, to my mind. And I'm not really talking about the slow burn thing, that nothing happened. The problem is the things that did happen. It wasn't slow because there was a slow build-up and of tension and drama. It was slow because it was boring, to be honest. I mean, we had, what, was it 3 episodes when they were sitting in the Scottish Highlands with all the characters doing nothing. They just sat around a campfire, and then a TIE fighter flew past and they hid from it, and that was all the excitement we got for 3 episodes. What? Really? A campfire and a TIE fighter. That's it. That's not exciting. That's not good storytelling. That is outright boring. And the completely pointless prison plot, a story arc that had no reason to exist at all. It was just a pointless way to somehow reconnect Cassian Andor with the Death Star. Uh, oh, he helped build it, and then in Rogue One he helped destroy it. I mean, it. What? Yeah, what? No, no, we didn't need that, and there was no point in showing that at all. And then, of course, we have the Mon Mothma arc. I mean, was there a point to it? Was there anything exciting about it? It provided us nothing of political life or the danger she was in. Uh, we learned that she had a douchebag husband, uh, but oh, and yeah, she had to make that was yeah, I'll admit that was interesting when she had to arrange a marriage with a basically a gangster. But there was so little of that. There should have been more. There should have been more uh, politics, more of Mon Mothma dealing with the imperial officials and stuff like that. But nothing. All we had was that goddamn dining hall, basically, and Mon Mothma having issues with her husband. Boring. And the way the team infiltrated the imperial outpost, it was silly. I mean, yeah, again, out in the highlands, and a couple of soldiers show up, and all they have to do is follow the rest of them into the outpost. It's what? No, no. I'm not saying it had to be like Mission Impossible type of mission, but something more than just showing up and pretending to be Imperial troopers and then walking into the base. Uh, Such poor writing. And then, of course, the whole plot around the sister that had no point to it at all. Maybe we'll see something in season two if we ever get a season two. But what was the point of the sister and that crashed spacecraft in the beginning with all the kids on that planet? I mean, it's oh, useless, pointless, waste of time. And the old lady being a catalyst somehow for the rebellion. It had no proper build-up at all. Why would the people rebel? There was no reason for anyone to rebel. We saw no oppression. Everyone seemed to have a job. No food shortages or stuff like that. It seemed like, you know, a mining town that was doing okay, right? They rebel against the Empire because everyone who loves Star Wars knows the Empire is evil, but in what way was the Empire, did the Empire give these people a reason to rebel? We saw nothing of that. And the security officer arc, this whiny, I don't know, whiny guy, right? Anakin Skywalker wannabe. It's what the hell? And he moved in with his mother. That was the story arc. He moved in with his mother and had cereal for breakfast. That was his story arc. Ah, what a complete mess. Yeah, that was exciting. Watching this guy getting scolded by his mother while he was eating cereal. Yeah, yeah, that is why I watch Star Wars. Now, like I said, it was a great idea that when I learned of it, I thought it had great potential. It just didn't turn out the way I thought it would turn out. Because I think that Andor, it really should have been a spy thriller uh, that could have easily been set in World War II or the Cold War era, where our heroes could have been replaced by the French resistance in occupied France or double agents running around in East Berlin in the 60s, 50s, 70s, whenever. Just with the twist that it was actually set in Star Wars, with people dealing with the oppression of the Empire instead of running around hiding from the Gestapo or KGB. I really think that would have worked. You don't always need lightsabers in Star Wars to tell good stories. I don't think you need that because Star Wars offers a lot of good storytelling, a lot of plot lines that has not yet been explored in the Star Wars universe, and something like this would have been really cool to see how ordinary people and spies and what have you try to uh, go ahead with their missions and stay alive within this oppressive society. I mean, just take the movie Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart. That could have so easily been retold in the Star Wars universe. So easily. And it would have worked because, you know, well, my dog is squeaking in the background. Because the resistance or double agents of World War II and the Cold War, those plot lines could really, really work in Star Wars. And I think that is what Andor should have been about. Now, a show that it wasn't without flaws by any means, but I think it did show imperial oppression really well and how ordinary people struggled with life being oppressed. And that show was The Man in the High Castle. Now, me personally, I thought the Japanese occupation of San Francisco in that show was particularly exciting, and I thought that was really interesting and they really well made how people lived in San Francisco being occupied by Imperial Japan, and also how the resistant movement, or how the characters, the main character, was slowly drawn into the resistance, and how they were trying to outsmart the Japanese rulers. And we also saw the side of the Japanese, how they were living their lives as overlords and how they were trying to deal with the rebels that were causing trouble. So it was a really interesting dynamic in that show. And I think had Andor, had Disney done the smart move, they would have tried and not copy paste, but taken notes from this show. And I think they also did an interesting job with showing us the ordinary lives and the things going on behind the scenes of the Nazi empire, following the Nazi officials over in occupied New York. So the Man in the High Castle basically gave us all that we wanted from Andor, but in a World War setting instead, World War II setting instead, and it was done in a much more interesting way. Even though that show in the end kind of spun out of control, and then I lost interest. But the setting was really, really well done, and season one especially got me hooked. And I well and truly believe that had Disney taken inspiration from World War II, Cold War, spy thriller settings, taken inspiration from The Man in the High Castle and the setting they created, then and taken that into Andor, the Andor show would have been awesome, truly awesome. Now, what the Andor show needed to tell us, to show us, was why people wanted to rebel, why everyday life was worth giving up. And I don't think they did that. They showed us a mining town where people had a job, and everyday life was just, moving along casually. We never saw the brutality of the empire. There was no like comparison to that it was used to be better with republic rule. There was no reason for people to rebel other than an old lady died and then she told people to fuck the empire, and it's like, what? Okay, but why? There was no reason, right? They weren't pushed around, they weren't treated like dirt. They had jobs, they had lives, they were just miners on a mining world. So frustrating. And they never really showed us why people should hate the empire, right? And yes, we had the ISB and all of that, and then towards the end we had the troops with riot shields and stuff. Yeah, but I mean, there wasn't like, that we saw what happens if you break the law, what happens if you stand up against the empire. There was no massive beatdowns. There was no, have criminals publicly executed and stuff. You know, show us why people should hate the Empire and why they should fear the Empire. We never saw why people should fear or hate the Empire. Because from what I could tell watching the show wasn't that, you know, they were treated fairly. They had good lives. And there was no point. And if they did stand up against the Empire, what was the danger of doing so? Again, frustrating. And they really should show us the dangers of being a rebel, joining the rebellion. We see it with Luthen and Saw Gerrera, how they are backstabbing each other and stuff like that. Yes, but that's just fan service. They should have put Andor and the main cast in those situations. Cassian Andor should be the guy who has to deal with betrayal, lies, and deceit. And these events should shape him and his companions, force them to make difficult decisions, have these events guide them down the path towards a mentality that the end justifies the means. The inglorious side of being a spy, a thief, and a saboteur, like we saw in Rogue One. Like, you know, we should see how Cassian Andor is slowly being shaped and molded into the character that he is in Rogue One. He starts out as a thief, a smuggler, and then he is drawn into the world of the rebels that is much harsher, much more dangerous, and filled with betrayal and deception. But we don't see that except when Luthien goes off to talk to Saw Gerrera. It doesn't affect the main character, and I think that was a big mistake in the show. And another mistake, a big mistake, if you ask me, was that the heist was not the main plot. You know, we saw it for a couple of episodes, and then Andor ended up on a prison planet, right? Boring prison planet. The heist should have been the main plot. It should have been more detailed, more intricate, and more dynamic. So instead of just sitting on a wet Scottish hill for a couple of episodes, they should have gathered information about the outpost. They should have tried to find people they could trust, scout out the location, track the guards, stuff like that. Make it a proper spy thriller break-in that, you know, it could fail, and they had to flee because they messed up. But, you know, they do drastic things that so it becomes a success in the end, despite everything that went on. And I mean, have people they trust betray them, have exciting chases on both on the planet and up in space, instead of Luthien being forced to escape this big tractor beam cruiser, have Andor and the team be forced to try and escape it for some reason. And people they needed to succeed with the mission, maybe gangsters, smugglers, what have you, betray them, or the Empire forces people to give up information about them, and all of this stuff, right? The Imperial might should be a constant threat towards the team instead of just a TIE fighter flying by overhead, right? So they have to be careful and really work hard to remain undetected. They should have drawn us into this world that they portrayed and showed us, and given not only the characters, they should have given us a reason to rebel against the Empire. They should have shown us exactly why there was a reason to rebel. They should have shown us the might of the Empire. Why do people fear rebelling? Why do people fear the Empire. Why isn't everything just wake up, go to work, work, and go back home, and that's the end of the day? There should be oppression. We never saw oppression. Give us a mission that is interesting and full of dangers, adventure, twists, and turns, um, where the heroes are constantly on thin ice with the risk of being detected and arrested. And that is what I think the Andor show should have been about, what it should have brought us, what it should have shown us. But like I said, it was a complete mess with Andor being on a hill in the rain by campfire for 2 or 3 episodes. We had a Imperial character that was whiny as hell who lived with his mom because he got fired. Andor ended up in prison doing nothing. Oh my god, he built parts of the Death Star. Wow, no, uninteresting. Didn't give us anything new. They just shoved the Death Star into another Star Wars plot. And I just. They failed, basically. And didn't give us anything interesting at all. So, what could Andor have been? Well, let's have a look. So, instead of stealing a high profile merchandise thing like he did in the actual show, I think they should have made Andor a small time criminal um, that only basically operated on his homeworld. He wasn't leaving the planet doing stuff. He's a small time criminal on his homeworld. And he knows how to work the system on that world. He knows the corrupt officials, the smugglers, the gangsters, and stuff like that. You know, how to make a living on the wrong side of the law on his homeworld. And as we see Cassian Andor moving around on his own homeworld, uh, making deals on both sides of the law, we learn the reality of his homeworld, of this life, the harsh laws that keep people in line. We get to know his family and his friends, uh, but we learn that Cassian, he is willing to take a lot of risks in order to earn that extra cash, to get some extra rations of food, to get the medicine needed. We learn how necessity basically has pushed him towards crime. And we also learn how imperial rule frightens all the people around him, and including him, obviously. So, this home world, this mining world, shows us what life is like under imperial rule. And the people, they will remember what it used to be like when the Republic was in charge. And for instance, miners will be replaced with slaves. They bring in slaves, alien slaves, to work in the mines, and the miners, they are, as a consequence, unemployed. And then they have the option, in order to escape unemployment, they can enlist into the Imperial Army and go off to fight the good fight, as the propaganda will tell them, and stuff like that. Food is rationed, and when the empire can't pay wages, they offer spice, drugs in other words, instead. So the rule of law is harsh and brutal. Corruption is widespread, unfair, and all over the place. And to get ahead in life, you have to bribe your way forward. And this is a world where rebellion is a real possibility. This is the world where Cassian Andor has grown up, and this is the world that we will dive into, learn, and understand. And we realize that, damn, life under the Empire is pretty crap. Maybe people will actually do something and rebel if they're just given the chance. And I agree that seeing the ISB in Android, it was interesting. I think it was cool to see that side of the Empire, but I don't think it was necessary at all for the plot line and didn't serve the show overall, to be honest. And what we could have had instead could have been a low-level ISB member operating locally, something like, a Gestapo or KGB figure. And being on a planet with little action, this character will be eager to prove to his or her superiors that something is finally happening. And much like we saw in Andor, the mining company's own security forces will be the main police force, and they will be the source for a lot of the discontent. And when things finally heat up, that's when the Imperial troops ensure law and order. It's kind of like what we saw in the show, but if we focus more on the home world, we will see uh, more of the brutality and the corruption within the security forces and the mining companies, and also how the mining companies react to the fact that the empire is moving in with troops, with officers, and with their own units to handle the situation. We get to see how imperial rule is harsh, unrelenting, and corrupt. Bribes and favors is part of everyday life in order to exploit the system, in order to survive, in order to get ahead, to avoid being targeted by the unfair security forces. And really going into fan fiction territory here, how do you get Andor involved in the overall plot? Well, if you ask me, if we have the homeworld and the situation on that planet and use that to get to know Andor, we know how he then can get involved in the main plot. Now, he is a local criminal with a lot of contacts. And so his job will essentially be to help a group of rebels to get into contact with corrupt officials. And perhaps later on, Andor's sister is killed or put in prison by authorities, maybe because of Andor helping the rebels, who knows? And this act pushes Andor into taking a more active part in the upcoming mission. He is committed to this mission on a whole other level, revenge. It's the most basic of plot lines. And so Andor could be convincing the team leader of his hatred for the Empire, and that earns him a more permanent spot on this team. Now, the official mission, that it could be a trick, it could be bullshit, it could be the actual goal. Who knows if you're doing a cloak and dagger show. But initially, the team's goal is to infiltrate the local Imperial outpost, since it could be containing an important tracking system that helps the Empire keep track of all its ships in the sector, so they can coordinate ships and stuff like that. And the rebels want to install a device into this system so that they can then track the Imperials. And this is, of course, backed by local gangsters, since it will help their smuggling operations. If they know where the Imperial cruisers are at, the local patrols are at, then they can smuggle more stuff in and out of the planet. So everyone's on board, trying as to why they need to get into the Imperial outpost. And from here, the show now begins to revolve around the fact that the team and Andor, they need to gather info on the Imperial outpost and the people working there. They need to know how to infiltrate and how to sneak past security. And Andor is forced to rely on his own friends and family to secure vital information, something that puts them in danger. And this increases the stakes overall for Andor's involvement in this mission. And it shows us how the rebels are active in trying to get into this place. They need all the information, and this puts them at risk because as they collect information, they run into there's a real possibility that they will be found out instead of, and I think this makes more sense, it's more interesting, instead of having them sitting on their asses in the Scottish Highlands for 2 or 3 episodes doing nothing, right? So here the entire team is more active in trying to figure out how to gain access to the outpost. And as things progress, Imperial authority on the planet begins to suspect that something is going on. And an investigation is started, and pressure on the team grows. It becomes a game of cat and mouse on the planet in these mining towns, as the team has to deal with corrupt officials, hide from law enforcement, and gather everything they need to pull off the mission. And just as important to the show would be to see how local authority and the Empire cooperate, how they clash over jurisdiction, etc. As the ISB agent on site becomes more convinced that a rebel cell is operating on his planet, tensions would increase with local authorities. Cracks begin to appear in the cooperation between the Empire and the mining companies. And just like in Andor, we could have a local cop being an important persona in the among the bad guys, and you could have him potentially teaming up with the ISB agent, not in the creepy way we got in Andor, but you know, more a more believable, logical way that they're both trying to deal with crime and rebels on this planet of theirs. And they agree that something big is going on, so they team up, the ISB agent and the local cop. And we can then see their struggles trying to deal with the corrupt nature of the Empire and the ineffective administration of the mining companies and stuff like this. But despite this, their tenacity allows them to get closer and closer to our heroes. And with every step along the way, Andor and the rest of the team, they have to deal with dangerous gangsters, corrupt officials and local authorities, disloyal friends and untrustworthy allies. And in the end, the Empire is onto them, closing in, about to arrest them all. They go through with the mission anyway because they need to fight the Empire. They have to fight the Empire. And as everything falls apart, friends are arrested, allies are killed, and Andor and the team still pushes on. And they succeed, but their success is only brief as they are forced to flee. A planted bomb detonates, which gives them the distraction they need in order to escape. The few of them that have actually survived this dangerous mission that has completely collapsed around them. But even now, as they escape, it's not over, as they're forced to flee the planet with high-speed chases going on. And then, as they eventually manage to leave the planet, in orbit, they have an Imperial cruiser hovering. And it could be something like we saw in the actual show, you know, this big tractor beam cruiser. And the last few remaining remnants of the team, they have to avoid capture throughout the entire show. And finally, as they're leaving the system behind, Andor is now on the path of truly joining the rebellion. Now, with Andor and the team gone, the Empire steps in on the planet. There has been an attack against an Imperial outpost rebel cell. A rebel cell has clearly been operating on this world. The Empire moves in. And as they do, tension rises as the Imperial fist closes even tighter on the throat of this planet. Confrontation is inevitable at this point, and Eventually, there is a clash. And it could very well be something like we saw in the show with a mob of locals crashing into Imperial riot police or and stuff like that. And this is a clash and then escalates. And like we've seen historically on Earth, and when in the 70s, for instance, when British were trying to deal with protests in Northern Ireland, all of a sudden a shot is fired. No one knows who, or maybe someone sees a gun, and then the sorry for that, the gun the gunfight is on, and it just one mistake in this volatile situation just brings about a full-on rebellion. And when the dust is settled, people are ready to take up arms, and the rebellion is there, willing to supply them with weapons. And this is when we learn that this was the main goal all along. The heist was intended to increase pressure on the population, to force the Empire to push them towards rebellion. Luthien Rael, the mastermind behind all of this from the beginning, eventually meets up with Mon Mothma, and he tells her he is doing his part of the deal, ensuring that there is a will to fight against the Empire. Yes, he is creating a situation where the people will rise up against the Empire, but he's doing it for the greater good because Mon Mothma needs support out in the galaxy. So they need to create hotspots on different planets. She does not approve of his methods. She's doing this to protect the people, and what he is doing is essentially getting people killed. But he reminds her that her methods will lead to nothing without his help, just as his methods are useless without her assistance, her resources, all her money. And she has secured more funds to pay for fuel, ships, guns, and mercenaries. And Luthien assures her that he can create at least 5 or 6 more rebellions on as many planets at the end of the month. So essentially, Mon Mothma can give Luthien Rael the funds to build a rebellion. But in order for them to have a rebellion, Luthien Rael has to push the Empire over the edge, so the Empire then pushes the civilian population over the edge in order to create hotspots that will birth rebel cells all across the galaxy. And towards the very end of the show, Andor joins up with a rebel group, and they don't trust him at first, obviously. When they learn that Andor's homeworld is rebelling and that the people there need weapons and support, they realize that they could use Andor's help, and he is more than willing to help them fight the Empire to free his homeworld. And now, Cassian Andor has taken the final step towards becoming a rebel. What do you think? Am I completely off? Was Andor a masterpiece, or do you think I'm onto something here, that Andor was a good idea that they kind of failed to exploit to the fullest?